Hello. We talk a lot at these things, don't we? So I'm going to not talk for a bit, just play you some music, and leave you in suspense. Bishy, what did I say? Remember to turn them back on. Thanks very much. I feel like this is old news now. Everyone's seen Meme Gloves, haven't they? No? No? Cool, okay. I'll tell you what they are. You don't mind if I sit down, do you? Thanks. So, my name's Chris Halpin, aka Dyskinetic. I'm a singer, songwriter, performer, and nowadays I'm known for playing these magical things, the Meme Gloves. So let me rewind a minute and tell you why I have them. I feel like, as is the case with a lot of my presentations, I'll probably raise more questions than I answer, but we'll have a bit of discussion at the end, because I'm sure it's all very, well, at least it's new to some of you. So, to rewind, I obviously, you might have guessed, the wheelchair gave it away. I'm a disabled person. I am a musician, a singer, songwriter. I don't always think diagnosis is helpful, but I think in the context of this, it's worth talking about my diagnosis. I have cerebral palsy, which is affecting not only my mobility, but my hands as well, and I have hand impairment and mobility impairments. But nonetheless, at the sort of ripe old age of 4, I'd already sort of decided that this wasn't going to stop me, and I was going to be a famous rock star, actually, is really the plan. Then, at the time, still thinking it's a barrier to overcome and not understanding the social model. But who understands the social model when you're 4 in 1986? So yeah, that journey was kind of going okay. I played in bands at school and was far too dictatorial. What's the word, Bishy? Dictatorial, that's the word I was looking for. I couldn't do the band thing, so I became a solo artist pretty quickly. I'd always faced pretty significant barriers to the music industry. I am from, if the ridiculous accent hadn't given it away, I'm from Birmingham. So in Birmingham, there's a lot of cool, trendy places to play, and those cool, trendy places to play are usually upstairs or they're in a basement. So I couldn't play on the circuit that a lot of people were playing on because it wasn't accessible to me. So although things were going all right as a sort of singer-songwriter, doing what I could on the live circuit, there was, apart from the obvious barriers, there was also societal barriers. People have a kind of, they struggle, I think people still struggle a little bit with the idea of a disabled musician, especially once you come out of the classroom and you're trying to head towards the music industry and do all that sort of stuff. I think people found that difficult, but that, as if that wasn't enough, it was around, I don't know, about it's about 7 years ago, my impairment actually started to progress. My hand impairment got a lot worse, and I was struggling to access instruments more and more. And I wasn't able to perform as much as I was already facing barriers to performance. But then I remember, this is about the time, for some context, things were going all right. I was getting plays on BBC Six. Tom Robinson was paying attention. It was starting to happen. And then I was taking the songs that people knew out of the set because my hands were like locking up on stage, and I was really struggling to play. And it sounds awfully dramatic, sat here now talking to you, but I really thought it was over. I thought my music career was on the scrap heap, frankly, because I was like, well, how am I going to play? But at that time, my perception of music and musical instruments was very wrapped up in my identity of being a guitarist and playing the piano somewhat. But that was how I understood music. So the idea of like how to progress was sort of gone. I grew up in a really tiny little village in the middle of nowhere, near Birmingham. And I was like token disabled kid at my school, right? And so I didn't have any connection with other disabled people, let alone any disabled musicians. But I thought, well, this is silly. I can't be the only disabled person who's trying to make music and succeed in the music industry, but I don't know who those people are. So where are those people, and where do they go for help? So as with all questions, certainly in those days, you go on Twitter. And I went on Twitter and I was like, well, where are the disabled musicians? What's happening? Lots of people kept telling me, you need to talk to a charity in London called Drake Music. Drake Music are the experts at this stuff. They know how to make music more inclusive through technology. So I partnered with Drake Music to start exploring. Gowan Hewitt, was the lead technologist at the time there, proposed this problem that we had to solve. What was my relationship with music going to be like if my access to instruments was going to change? So with that, we started exploring technology, and I have come to hold a different opinion of the technologies that I saw at the time, but I think it's fair to say, and I've said this many times with Drake in public, I was a little underwhelmed. The idea of, for example, classroom people you might know, Soundbeam. Now, I'm not having a go at Soundbeams, right? But like 14-year-old me wanted to be Steve Vai. So the idea of like playing a scale with a light that wasn't working for me. And I couldn't see myself playing an iPad. And Gowan proposed this problem that needed solving, that there wasn't an instrument that was accessible, but still had the scope for virtuosity. And we quite honestly didn't know how to solve this problem, except that Drake Music at this time were beginning to have a conversation with a team around the amazing Grammy Award-winning superstar genius, Imogen Heap, who was trying to solve a very, very different problem with technology. So Imi had this problem that she plays electronic music, right? Her music is very electronic, and she's a singer-songwriter, and she's singing to an electronic sound, and you're seeing a woman on stage with a laptop, and as she famously said, for all you know, she's checking her emails. She wanted the audience to understand a way in which the electronic sound was coming from, a gestural thing that the audience could see and understand. This is where the electronic music is coming from, and it's not just an app in a laptop. And she had the idea that it could be achieved with gloves and with a gestural interface. She saw some demos at MIT, which led her to believe that it might be possible. And very long story short, she assembled an amazing team of technologists and textile people to make the first Mimi glove. And at the time, there we go, aren't they pretty? One of only 2 white pairs in the world, people. They made the first prototypes of the Mimi gloves. And at the same time, they were beginning this conversation with Drake Music, because Drake Music saw potential that Imogen, quite by accident, had invented a kind of social model musical instrument. Instrument where the player doesn't have to change. For some context, I got kicked out of piano lessons when I was like 14 because I can't do much with melodies with my right hand. And it was just like, well, this isn't for you. Either you fix your hand or you got to go. So I had to go. But an instrument that learns the user, that's wearable, and then can grow and change with you. That seemed like a real social model breakthrough. So Drake Music very kindly and very kind of casually said, let's try using them. And they invested in one of the prototype pairs. There was 15 prototype pairs made around this time. This is about 6 years ago. Another person who bought a pair, who you've definitely heard of, is Ariana Grande. She started using them at the same time. Obviously, I guess it goes without saying, she wasn't using it as an access thing. She was using it just as a really exciting instrument. But the potential that we saw at Drake Music was quite something in terms of like turning this gesture into sound. What if I could do, I'm going to keep doing this thing where I keep getting up out of my chair. It really annoys people in Sainsbury's to tell you, they want you, you're either in the wheelchair or not, mate. Like, do you need it or not? Like, as soon as you stand up, they're like, collared, there you go. I think they've caught you then. It's true, this is my life. Yeah, let me just have a sip of this. So, like, any gesture, the idea that any gesture, is this making sense? I don't care if it isn't or isn't yet. It will make more sense in a minute, but if you're completely confused, that's totally cool. The idea that a gesture could turn into a sound. So I started mucking about. I went to a snazzy party at Imogen Heap's house. I was a massive fan of hers anyway, so I was really excited to meet her. And there was so much buzz as well. People were talking about like the idea of me repurposing her instrument as an access tool. So for some context of buzz, I gave an interview to Wired before I'd even seen a pair of Mimi gloves, and they ended up running a 3-page feature. It was like, no, this is the breakthrough, this is the thing. So no pressure. I was a little bit overwhelmed at the time, but I was like, this is so goofy now, but I'm going to show you. First thing I did, I was like, can I shadow box and play the drums? So I tried that. But very quickly, it became, the sort of potential was, okay, so here, rewind. Here's the problem I was having. I was playing music and recording music and doing quite well in the studio with lots of instruments and, you know, about VSTs and doing things in the DAW and creating all these layers. And then you would see me live, and assuming I could get into the venue in the first place, it was just another bloke playing an acoustic guitar, sharing his feelings in A minor. And like all of the vision of my big production was gone because there was just the gloves. But then suddenly it was like, very quickly, the access stuff with the technology kind of moved out of the way because I was like, well, and this is what great accessible tech does, is it empowers you artistically, one would hope. Because suddenly it was like, well, what could I do on stage now that I couldn't do before? And the first thing I thought about doing was, well, I play all these instruments in the studio. Could I play all these instruments live? So I started thinking about live looping. And then I started thinking about what if I do a bit of live looping and I make a really obvious mistake like that and it sounds absolutely rubbish? How could I fix it? Like that. Yeah, so it's magic. I can just do anything. But yeah, so the next problem that I was trying to solve... sorry, I'm just going to deal with this email. She warned you. Right, okay, so the piano thing. We're back to the piano lessons at school and being kicked out of there. So I couldn't play the melodies or do anything with the piano. I could bash out a few basic chords, but my vision as a composer couldn't serve what my hand impairment kind of imposed upon me. So what if I could play the piano with a simple gesture and play a complex melody? Okay, now it's starting to make sense. Could I loop that and record it? all started to make sense, and this very abstract interface of like what I've just done with that, hopefully now it starts to make sense. There's no correlation between the gesture that I used. I just used the gesture that was accessible to me to create the loop that you're hearing now. But sometimes the audience needs a kind of an anchor, a thing that they can relate to a traditional instrument, like a visual clue to say, oh, I get what's happening with the sound. Doing stuff like that, people went, oh, I kind of get it. That's enough of that. Make sense? Yeah, good. So, yes, I know, I'm back at the laptop, which is the thing we swore we wouldn't do. Imogen said, don't go back to base camp. But you kind of have to. It was a bit spinning wheel of death. I think the Wi-Fi is grumpy. So where was I in the story? Oh yeah, so then it really exploded. That was a thing. So yeah, the buzz thing. So when Wired was talking to me about that, that was just the start of a huge adventure, which I always feel a bit goofy talking about this stuff because it feels like I'm saying, hey, check me out. Like, I was playing to 5 people and a dog in Tamworth. And then 6 months of this, people are stopping me in Sainsbury's going, you're that dude with the gloves, aren't you? And before I knew it, I did a little UK tour with, has anyone heard of Attitude is Everything? A charity that makes music accessible to disabled audiences. They were trying to solve a problem of well, where are the disabled artists? How do we make live music in the music industry accessible to disabled artists? So I did a headline tour with them, which kind of got the ball rolling. Toured the UK. That tour was meant to run for a week, I think. Yeah, a week. And it ended, started in Guildford, and it ended 18 months later via Europe on the main stage at the Kennedy Centre the following summer, 18 months later, in front of about 4,000 people. So from 100 people in Guildford to the Kennedy Centre, thank you, that's very good. Yeah, I know, it's good, but what mattered was people needed to see it. People told me their disability stories. People were, I remember the last night of the first leg, a security guard came into my dressing room and he was like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be cheeky, but I just wanted to let you know I've been filming this on my phone because my nephew's got CP and I can't wait to show him this. And it mattered to people a great deal. So that started to raise a big question about the visibility of disabled artists and just the fact that, well, there aren't any, actually. It's really not very diverse. The mainstream music industry is really, really thin. Or at least it was at 2016 when this was going on. I'm involved in some projects at the moment with some major brands. I'm all NDA'd up to my earlobes, but I can say that the conversation is moving forward and that improvements to disability visibility are happening. So that is why it kind of mattered. But back to the technology for a minute, because that's what you wanted to see, right? What I was doing on that first tour was playing songs that I'd already written, and I'd written them with traditional instruments. So that was cool, but adapting my guitar songs to the gloves was the adventure, and that did me very well, and I toured and made quite a nice career. And this went from being, I'll try the Mimi gloves and write a blog post about it, and then give them back to Drake Music, became my full-time job. But then people were always asking me, but can you write music with the gloves? Can you compose for them? And that was a problem that we hadn't really, none of us had really tried to solve. Everyone who played the Mimi gloves, Imogen's got an extensive back catalogue. She always jokes that, she's got to play hide and seek, otherwise she's going to get booed off stage. So she's got to work out how to play those old songs for the gloves. And that's what I was doing, and we were all doing. But then earlier this year, I did a commission with Sage Gateshead to explore what would it be like to compose with the gloves. And one of the things that I wanted to solve was, like I hinted, you can tell I got a hang-up about the piano lessons, right? I always wanted to compose piano works, sort of semi-serious ones. I'm a big nerd for Ryuichi Sakamoto. I had a big influence there. And I was like, but my hands won't let me do it. I can't play the piano well enough to compose those things. And then I thought, well, can the gloves be used to compose piano works? Better still, could the gloves be used to compose a piano work that no pianist could play? Could you do something with the gesture that wasn't even possible? Now, there might be a pianist amongst you who will listen to this and go, oh, I could do that. But, for the rest of us, I felt like this was pushing the boundaries a little bit. So I'm going to play a piece that I'm definitely going to sit down for this one. So I went to Japan in 2019, and Japan and Japanese culture has always had a big thing in my heart, and Ryuichi Sakamoto's influence on this piece, I think, is really obvious. So this was one of the piano works that I composed as part of the Sage Gateshead Commission. This is called Mono no Arawe. Done it again. Thank you. Yeah, so that was kind of one of the things that I just could never do. And then the technology kind of empowered me to finally be able to do something that I thought was never going to be possible for me. But the whole point about all this stuff is, sorry, I am distracted by loading my next song, which my laptop's going to crash. I know it's going to crash. When you can smell it. They just like, that spinny beach ball is coming for me, and there's nothing I can do about it. But it matters, all this stuff, because I feel, and I know a lot of disabled people agree with me, unfortunately, like, I'm quite successful in the music industry as disabled people go, but unfortunately that really isn't saying a lot, because disabled people aren't really visible in the music industry at all. As I say, I feel like things are changing, but this empowerment through a technology and through an instrument is really important. And over the years, I've been doing this stuff and playing, and it's all great to play these big gigs and travel all over the world, but I realized that the important thing as well was to get into schools, get into classrooms, and for young people to see it firsthand and to see what they do, and to recognize, as I've worked more in SEND schools and done workshops and things in partnership with Drake Music and Matt Makes Music in Birmingham, it matters because people, I sounded ever so brummy then, it matters because young disabled people need to see that happen. I think we're going to have a little Q&A in a moment. What do you think? Should I play? Should I Q&A? Let's play one more thing, and then we'll Q&A. Is that all right? So, yeah. So the trip to Japan the Japan theme's with us and for the duration now. Oh, look, you can even see my tattoo. It's Japanese for game face, because you've got to get your game face on. So this is a piece that I prepared when I went to Tokyo to perform, again, influenced by Reiichi Sakamoto. I just needed a piece to show people the potential of the gloves and just kind of like cram in all the tricks, right? Live looping, all the gestural interfaces, just everything I could think of in one piece of music. So this is that piece of music. If you've ever seen me on YouTube, then I guess stop me if you've heard this one, because you probably have. This is Koi no Yokan. Missed that chord? You know it's live.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that wonderful talk and that presentation and your performance. I love it. I've seen, every time I see you perform, I'm really blown away.
Oh,
Just
thank
to say
you.
that.
Especially from you. This is old news to you, of course, right? You've seen this once or twice.
Yeah, but it's also, we're both connected to Imogen Heap as friends and as collaborators. I think she's done a lot of good for the creatives and the artists around her. We've only got a short amount of time, and I'm not going to lie, there is only one question, but it's brilliant. So I'm going to read it out, so keep the gloves on. Someone anonymously asked, I would love to know more about the individual gestures and what they trigger. How refined, nuanced can the gestures be? And what gestures turns the gloves on?
That's really good. It's... Okay, so it's a completely blank canvas, and I think that's the thing that's kind of intimidating about all of it, is like there's not, people say to me like, so have you got to like learn a thing, like is this always this sound or whatever, but there is no, it's a complete blank canvas, so you've got to design a posture, okay, Glover lingo, we know a posture is like, that's a posture, right? That's one finger point, that's sort of, Imi and I have this thing, puppet hand, you know, that stuff. So those are the postures. So it learns those postures through a series of the bend sensors teach the AI to learn the posture, right? So those are the things that, so to rewind, it's got the posture recognition. It's also got a degree of spatial awareness. The gyroscopes are telling it, it knows now that my hand is up. It knows that my hand is forwards. It knows that my hand is left. It also knows how quickly my hands are moving, so when I'm doing that boxing drum thing, there's a little accelerometer in the back of this that is going, and then from then on, it's an imagination exercise. It's going, right, these are the parameters, how do I then turn that into something? Teaching it that when I do this, I want to hear a violin.
Yeah.
MIDI is coming out. If that wasn't obvious, the gloves don't make any sound. So all that gesture becomes MIDI stuff. And then that's it. And then how do you turn it on and off? Well, usually, you see me do that a lot, don't you? Because that's my thing for something's happening. Like usually that's, I've ended the loop or I've ended the song. But it could be anything, but I don't know why. I pinch my ears.
Yeah,
who knows?
Nice.
That's my thing.
Nice.
That probably raises more questions than it answers. But there you go. That's kind of how it works, I think.
Well, I did want to mention that there are children's versions of the Mimu gloves called Mini Moo gloves, which I use more as a vocal effects type instrument. But what's really amazing about it is you use the same Glover interface, the technology, but it's much more simplified in terms of, you know, the gloves can't do as much as the ones that you're wearing.
No, but there's an important access point. So we talk about access and technology, and yes, this is a great bit of accessible tech. It's also a very expensive bit of accessible tech. My prototype pair cost £5,000. These are a lot cheaper. They're £2,500 a pair, so it's still an expensive bit of kit. I feel really bad. I've literally got a pile of these at home, and people are like, how do I get Mimu gloves? I don't know, they keep giving me them, but here we are. The classroom-friendly versions that Vishy's talking about are 40 quid. Like, it's a bit of a difference, right? It comes as a little sewing kit. And have you done the sewing kit yourself? You made it?
No. Someone,
yeah, I didn't do mine either.
Sewed them. Helen sewed them for me.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, Nikki did mine on the machine. I was like, I ain't touching hand sewing. But yeah, it's a little like classroom-friendly kit, but it plugs into the software that we're using here. If you don't know, I'm using a piece of software called Glover, which is a bespoke application made by Mimu. And then I'm just using Ableton Live. Somebody somewhere from Ableton is here, I know. But I'm just using a stock DAW. Anything that understands MIDI will understand Glover. But yeah, that's an expensive investment, £2,500. But these little 40 quid kits, and no, they don't have, for one thing, they don't have bend sensors. So it's like it's that bit, isn't it, really? It's like a palm and a sensor. But you could still do stuff like what you've seen me do tonight. It is still tonight. Yeah, you know where I am in the day. With the 40 quid school ones. So, and you use them for real in your show, so they've got to be not rubbish.
I headlined the British Library with them, yeah.
Is there a better recommendation for the £40 Mimi glove?
And what I also like about it is I use them as a vocalist for vocal effects, but you really feel it as a physical entity. It really affects the way you perform music. It really engages the audience. They're absolutely fabulous. So I would really recommend. And they're Mini Moo gloves, aren't they, Chris?
The Mini Moo gloves.
Mini Moo. Okay. So sadly, we've run out of time. Thank you again, Chris, for your presentation.